Again, I just want to welcome you to our Following the Pattern of Godly Women of History series. And this is the first of what I hope will be an ongoing series that will continue throughout the years, meeting maybe 2 or 3 times a year. And just to introduce us to some of these ladies and to learn from their example. So today we're going to learn about 2 different ladies. Cindy's going to teach us about Gladys Aylward, who was a missionary to China. And then I will be teaching about Sarah Edwards, a pastor's wife from the 1700s. And I just want to throw this out there. If you would be interested in studying a godly woman of history, just please let me know. If you'd be interested in studying and preparing and maybe presenting in the future, I just want to open that up for anybody who would like to do that. We are looking for teachers, presenters, sharers, and so just speak to me about that, and we will get you on a list for the future, especially if there's somebody who's personally encouraged you in your walk with the Lord that you'd like to do a deeper dive and present and share with us. Before we dive into our learning about these 2 ladies, I want to give you a couple of reasons why we should read and study biographies of believers of the past. And the first reason is because we are called to observe and follow the example of those who have followed the example of Christ, right? We learned about this in the book of Philippians not too long ago. Philippians 3:17 says, "Brothers, join in imitating me, and keep an eye on those who walk according to the example you have in us." Learning from others is part of being a disciple. As disciples of Christ, we not only follow him and what he has taught us in his word, we also follow the example of others who have followed Christ and learn from their example. And then again, as I said in my prayer, this should also motivate us to leave a godly example for those who come after us. Hebrews 12:1 points us to the great cloud of witnesses surrounding us as a motivation to run the race with endurance. In the context, the writer is pointing back to the list in chapter 11 of all those Old Testament saints who lived by faith. Reading through the list of faithful men and women who persevered through the trials and struggles of life encourages us to press on and follow their example. We can find that same encouragement to press on and live faithful lives as we read about godly men and women throughout history. The second reason is because we find encouragement in seeing how God uses ordinary faithful people to do extraordinary things. The women we're going to learn about were just ordinary women like you and me. They faced physical weaknesses, limited abilities and opportunities, and the lack of strength and resources. They were humans, frail, sinful, constantly fighting their flesh. They experienced all the limitations, pains, and challenges that we face on a daily basis. They weren't super spiritual or superhuman, and yet God used them to do extraordinary things. The key is that they were women who loved the Lord and wanted to be faithful in whatever God had called them to do, in whatever sphere of influence where God had placed them, using whatever opportunities, resources, and skills that he had given them. Jim Elliot, a missionary, gave this quote about missionaries, which I think applies to all of us as believers. He said, "Missionaries are very human folks just doing what they're asked. Simply a bunch of nobodies trying to exalt somebody." And I love that. We too are just a bunch of nobodies, right? But our desire is to exalt somebody, our God. Noel Piper says, "These ordinary women had an extraordinary God who enabled them to do extraordinary things." The third reason is because we serve the same God who enabled them to live faithful lives. In the same way that God saved these women, sanctified them, and used them for his glory, he can use us too. God gave them strength when they were weak, direction when they had choices to make. He gave them grace throughout difficult trials and suffering. He helped them be faithful in the everyday, ordinary events of life. He enabled them to persevere until the end, until they saw God face to face. God faithfully worked in their lives and used them for his glory. And God can use you and me too. He uses broken clay pots, which is what we are. But he gets all the glory and all the praise because he is great. Hebrews 13:7-8 says, "Remember those who led you, who spoke the word of God to you, and considering the result of their conduct, imitate their faith. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever." We are to consider and imitate the faith of others because Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He is still working to build his kingdom through ordinary people like you and me. And the final reason that we should read and study biographies and men and women of the past is because it increases our longing for heaven. And you might say, how is that possible? Well, I can honestly say that often when I read a biography, these men and women become dear friends and kindred spirits. Even though our times on earth may be separated by hundreds of years, and we can only get to know them through the pages of a book, at least for now, one day we are going to meet them face to face. These are our brothers and sisters in Christ. You could say we're getting to know our spiritual family. One day, we who share a love for Christ and a devotion to live for him while on earth, we will get to worship our beloved Savior and God together as one. What an amazing thought. Reading and learning about godly men and women in history causes us to long for heaven, where we will all be together with other believers, enjoying the glory of our God forever. So just to conclude those thoughts, just a quote from Noelle Piper. She says, "That's why I read biography, to remember people who've led the way on the path with God, to consider their lives and to imitate their faith, because we have the same God yesterday, today, and forever." So before we move on to our First Lady, if today we have succeeded in whetting your appetite to read more about these ladies, guess what? You don't have to go home and wait for Amazon to deliver it. You can get started right away because we have a book table at the back with a couple of books that you can purchase and take home today, and you can start reading for yourself today. Because even what Cindy and I bring you is only a tiny fraction of what you can learn about these ladies. We obviously can't share everything that we've learned. So there are 3 books back there. And the first one is a book by Youth with a Mission on Gladys Aylward. This whole series, by the way, is such a great series. They have lots of godly men and women, and they are on a level you can read with your kids, right? You read together as a family, or your kids, when they start reading, they can read too, but this is a great one. And then for Sarah Edwards, we have Delighting in God by Sharon James. Sharon James is an excellent biography writer. Her books, I love her books. And then, if you just want to get a little taste of each, this is Noelle Piper's Faithful Women and Their Extraordinary God, and she has each chapter on a different lady. So there's not only Sarah and Gladys in here, but then some other women also. It's kind of an overview of some different women. So these are on the back table. It is a help yourself honor system kind of table. The prices are listed, and it's just really to reimburse the church for what they paid for the books. There's a zippered pouch out there you can put your money in, and if you didn't bring money with you today, that's okay. Just go ahead and take the book home with you, and you can get the money to Sandy or I tomorrow. If you write a check, write it to the church, and just tell us that's what it's for, the books. So without further ado, we will open it up to Cindy, who's going to teach us on our First Lady, Gladys Aylward. And if you didn't get notes, there are notes in the back. And take it away, Cindy.
Oops. Good morning, ladies. Good morning. Isn't it a beautiful day? It's always a beautiful day with the Lord, but put that aside. But the weather, I really get charged up with nice weather like this. I have books too. I was going to put these in the library, and two of them are, I think two of them are the same. I don't know. Anyway, if you want to borrow books, I have 3. I was going to put them in the little library over here behind the coffee pot, but this is for children. It's a poetical type. If you want to borrow these from me, or I'll eventually get them in the library. I couldn't get them because of the chairs. You can come up here later. Or if you just want to have your own and buy them, that's perfectly fine. There's another one, Gladys Aylward, The Little Woman. It's a biography written by Christine Hunter. Very, very good. So I'm going to use that later. I just want to thank Brenda for asking me to do this. This is really neat. I'm really privileged to be part of the beginning of this conference, and I learned a great deal from Glad. I always want to call her Alice, combine the 2 names. So if I do that, you'll know who I'm talking about. But I learned a great deal from her. And Brenda said they become kindred spirits, which is very, very true. I learned a lot. I knew her more intimately, and I could relate to her not as a missionary, of course, but as a person who had a desire to do something, and there were roadblocks in the way, but she kept going. She was persistent. Take out, or I hope you all have the papers that were given to you. There's one on a list of words, if you don't have that. Does everyone have it? Or if you don't have that, maybe somebody could pass it out if there's some left. But I didn't get a chance to put Bible verses on these words. I wanted to, but it was too late. So I'm going to give you some Bible verses to go with these words. And these words are all things that the Lord taught Gladys, or things that were involved in her going to China. Process is, and the first one is process is important. That's on there. Okay, good. Thank you. We talked about, what she could get on and what she couldn't get on there. The process is important, and then the other words are, of course, character qualities or things the Lord taught Gladys. So the first one, process is important. Put Philippians 1:6. Take out a pen or pencil. Philippians 1:6. He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ. And patience is James 1:2-4. Count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And there's other verses that, of course, you're probably thinking of that you can put in these slots. That's fine. Perseverance and persistence, Galatians 6:9, 2 Thessalonians 3:13. Let us not be weary in doing well and doing good. Humility, Proverbs 22:4. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled. Whoever humbles himself will be exalted. And when I think about Gladys, I thought about this word, and I thought, she was totally humble. I mean, she had no pride that I could read about at all. She was just straightforward. That was a characteristic of her. And courage, Joshua 1:9, be strong and of good courage. And again, you probably know other verses that fit in there. That's fine. On the back, no, not on the back of mine, but on the back is a list of resources that I didn't read all of these, but I used them for references. So that's another handy bibliography for you. Okay, books in the library. I'm talking to myself. Okay, as I tell you about Gladys, I will focus not on just her time in China, but the process the Lord used to get her there, teaching her those attributes I was just speaking of. Gladys was born in 1902 in Edmonton, England, and she died in 1970 in Taiwan. She had an ordinary life growing up. Brenda talked about ordinary lives. There's a song long ago, Ordinary People. Maybe some of you know it. I think Barbara Streisand sang it, and that kept going through my head, ordinary people. I won't sing the rest. But anyway, God does use ordinary people. She was just a plain person, ordinary person. Her family was, her father was a postman, and her mother a homemaker. She was not a good student, and she didn't like school, and eventually she dropped out at 14. Young people, don't get any ideas, okay? I'm glad to see the young people here. It really is encouraging to see them here and know that they're learning this. She eventually dropped out at 14, at which time she became a clerk and then a maid and a nanny for a wealthy family. Gladys was a small woman, you can probably see in her picture, being only 4'10", whom Elizabeth Elliot described her as a small package of Cockney dynamite. And Cockney is a term, I guess a slang term for the English working class. When she spoke, she had to stand on a box because she was so short, but her powerful voice made up for her height. One man said, after hearing her speak, that the doors did not need to open to let everyone out because they were so humbled they would just slip through the bottom of the door. She told Elizabeth Elliot after reading about Abraham and God's command for him to get out of the unfamiliar country and go out of a familiar country and go to an unfamiliar country, that she sensed the Lord was leading her to do the same thing. Believing that God had a claim on her life, she staked her life on his word. She truly believed in prayer and out of the weakness of man, and that out of the weakness of man came God's opportunity to show his strength. 1 Corinthians 1:25. God chooses the foolish things of the world to shame the wise, and he uses the weaknesses of men to glorify himself, because the weakness of God, which there is no weakness of God, is stronger than man's strength. It's simply a comparison. In 2 Corinthians 12:9-11, God's grace is sufficient for me, for when I am weak, then I am strong. God's power shines in our weaknesses. I forgot to say, with the words, if you want to take notes or something, you probably figured that out already, but I needed to tell you that. Gladys was raised in church, but grew disinterested in religious things as a young person. Although she says for some reason she attended a meeting, the Lord leading her, where she heard the gospel and put her faith in Christ. She joined Young Life Ministries, and at another meeting, she picked up a magazine where she read that millions of Chinese people had never heard the gospel. This bothered her. She tried to get her brother and some friends to go to China, but her brother said that was for an old maid to do. She was angry at first, but thought to herself, why not me? She admitted she had no special gift or talent. She didn't go far in school, but she did know how to talk. So on December 12th, 1929, she applied to China Inland Mission. While they were impressed with her strength of character, they were not sure of her lack of schooling. They accepted her on a probationary basis for 3 months, where at the end of her time, they still found her lacking the right tools to be a missionary to China. This is really fascinating. She was just an ordinary person, but her life is just amazing. If I did not know this was all factual, I would say, no, that couldn't have possibly happened, especially her trip to China. Some amazing things that happened. And again, as Brenda said, we cannot tell you everything about these ladies. You have to get a book. You have to read their books and to really appreciate what they went through to do what God was just simply asking them to do. They also weren't sure at the age of 20 that she could learn the language well enough to be effective. But God, right? Again, in our weakness, God shows his strength. We're studying unmet expectations in our regular Bible study, right? And that's what I kept thinking of with Gladys. She had a lot of unmet expectations. At this time, I'll share one of mine. I was wondering when to share this, but when Herschel and I first got married, I was teaching at Lakeside Christian School. And I was teaching, I had a class where kids would come and go as a resource center, and I would try to help them with their studies. And I loved it. I loved doing that, but there was something, I said to Herschel, there's something more. I'm just putting Band-Aids on hemorrhages. And, you know, I couldn't, I didn't know what it was. So I went to a teacher's conference that they sent us to, and I went to a workshop on educational therapy. And I went home and I said to Herschel, it's exactly what I want to do. And I love the techniques they used. I talked with teachers that had done it, and I said, this is what I want to do. So he encouraged me to talk to the administrator of the school, and he was on board with it. And they gave me a little corner of the library. I said, well, at least I have my foot in the door. That's a good thing. Maybe next year will be different. Well, it was different. He left to do be I guess the director of a accrediting agency for Christian schools. I was very happy for him. He was the type of person to do that. He was moving on. But I said, what about the program? I don't have anybody to support me. So he had left, and then the teachers were on board, the parents were on board, except for the high school teachers. They weren't too much on board, which was hard. That was my trial in that area. But anyway, I loved what I did. I just wanted to work with the kids. And another administrator came on board who was, I keep hearing the Psycho music from the movie Psycho. I mean, he was just really not supportive with anybody, not supportive of the program. He told one of my students one time that she came in and said, I hear the program's not going to continue next year. And I said, what? And I marched myself down to his office. I said, what is this? You know? So I said, well, I'm just staying for this one student who's going to graduate in a couple years. And that's it, because he was just so bad. So I did that. I stayed till my one student graduated, and then Herschel and I moved over to this area. And at the same time, we were trying to adopt a child. So we were going through, you know, I had that desire too. I had the desire to do this program, and I kept asking the Lord, why? You know, you gave me the desire. I went to training. My husband's on board. The administrator's on board. It all looks good, and then a roadblock. And I thought, I don't understand. For years, I had to say I did not understand. There was no closure on that. But at the same time, I did not see the Lord working in my life, Herschel's life, our lives together for the adoption of Caleb. You know, sometimes when we are so into something and we're looking at the end goal, we don't see what the Lord is doing at the time. So it took me, I wanted to do both. I wanted to adopt, and I wanted to do the educational therapy program, because I just, it was something I just loved. I didn't think it was idolatry at all, because I wasn't willing to sin to get it, but it was just something I just dearly loved. And so we moved over here, and the second part of that story will come. But anyway, it's about Caleb's adoption. So that was a no. The Lord shut the door. I could not shut the door on that. I said, I really want to do this. And Herschel said, well, let's move to Orlando, where there are a plethora of Christian schools that did this type. And I don't know, we decided not to do that, of course. But we moved on. So nothing is impossible with God, though, is it? Absolutely nothing. And as I look back on my life, and Gladys probably look back on her life, we see God's hand in everything. And it's amazing to do that. You don't see it at the time. It's like you're on a trip, and, there's things that you kind of see, but you don't really see. And finally, at the time, you say, okay, I remember seeing all that. But anyway, and nothing can thwart his will. Isn't that so comforting? What kind of a God would we have if we could actually stop what he was doing, or anybody could stop what he was doing? He is an infinite God working with finite people. And to me, that's just amazing. He has stooped to say, I want you. He has worked in our life to bring us to salvation. He has chosen us. And it just, I think, why me? My whole family is not saved. I may have a couple people that don't talk about it, but pretty much my whole family is unsaved. Herschel's family is unsaved. And I think, why me? Why did he choose me? It's very humbling, and because for his reasons alone. Job 42:1. When Job finally realized who God was, he admitted that he was sovereign and nothing at all could stop his will from happening to Job's life or anyone's life. God allowed Satan to afflict Job, but Satan could only go so far. I am so glad God has got control over Satan, over us with the mistakes that we make. It reassures me to ponder this. God had intended for Gladys to go to China, but his way. I just want to say this. An answer of no, a discouragement, a rejection is no reason to not continue on. If we have a biblical desire from the Lord, if the Lord has said he wants us to do this, if he's put it in our heart through prayer, through being in his word, through worshiping, and through godly counsel, there's no reason to keep going until God finally shuts that door, as he did with me at the school. And it took me a while to get over that, but then I finally realized, oh, okay, this is what you want us to do. I didn't see that at the time. I don't know why. You go back and say, why didn't I see that? Because we're finite people. Okay, God had intended for Gladys to go to China. Discouragement is not a reason to stop doing what the Lord has asked us to do. It could be just a rerouting of our desires or God's plan. Not that God has, okay, plan A. Okay, that didn't work. Okay, plan B. He doesn't do that. He works within our desires. He works within what we do and our choices, and he has a plan for us. That is amazing too. But he's God. He does what he wants to do. Okay, Satan would love us to think that God is trying to ruin things for us, or God is not in control. If we are truly seeking him in his word, we can keep going until he shuts the door completely. We have choices as long as they are biblical choices, and as long as we are praying and keeping and seeking godly counsel. God is not a dictator who wants to give us commands, but he works within our choices. He doesn't want to give us commands without having a relationship with us. He loves us, he chose us, and cares about what we care about. He puts desires in our hearts. While we commune with him and worship him and surrender our agenda over to him, Psalm 37:4 says, delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Delight meaning to take pleasure in, and I guess we've all heard that. It doesn't mean delight yourself in the Lord and he'll give you what you want, because we have sinful desires. Our heart is deceitful and desperately wicked. If God would never give us what our heart desired without him changing that. We have so many sinful desires that we don't talk about, but he would never do that. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10. By being still, we can know genuinely who God is by being in his word, letting him show us who he is. So that verse doesn't mean just be still and know that God is God and say, oh yeah, God, I know you're God. It means to really know him intimately, to study his character, to study the past, how he was faithful to his own, and how he's been faithful to us in the past too. I'm at this age where I look back and I say, wow, God really has been faithful. And I remember, like I said, widow ladies would say that. They would say, God has been so faithful to me. And I think, wow, I have yet to see that. I mean, not that I didn't, but I have yet to be at their maturity level to say God has been faithful to me and to really see it. And now I've seen so much. So God sent, let me see, I skipped a bunch. As we enjoy God, and he will align our desires within that relationship. Jeremiah 17:9 says about the heart being deceitful and desperately wicked, who can know it? He would never give us those desires. So God sent Gladys a different way, a way that would be good for her preparation to China, her spiritual growth, and to glorify himself. She was not discouraged by what the mission board said about her skills. She truly believed God wanted her in China. She told the CIM training committee that she was sorry that she was not a very good student. I thought that was cute. But one thing she did learn was to pray as she never had before. And that was one thing she was very grateful for. She saw purpose in the training. She saw purpose in the training she did receive and was motivated to continue seeking the Lord to send her to China. So she was not discouraged by that apparent, closed door. Some would consider, oh, the door's closed, they don't want me. And I really respect her for going to a mission organization for accountability. And instead of just saying right off the bat, oh, I'm going to go by myself. I don't know how many people would have done that back then, especially single women. But I really appreciate her wanting to go with a mission board. But that was not discouragement for her. In the process, she learned all she could about China in the process of waiting. And waiting is so very important in the process of God sanctifying us and making us more like him. I can't express that more. I found that in my life, that at the time I was waiting, I was saying, why God? This is a great desire. I prayed about this. My husband's on board, people are on board. And why is this not happening? And I've learned that waiting really refines us so much. So, in the process, she learned all she could about China and read about Hudson Taylor, who served in China for 54 years. God's plan was to teach her through life itself. One of the mission board's executives offered her a job helping a retired missionary couple in their home, again as a maid. At first, she thought this was a setback, being a maid again, but it was definitely part of her life training. And, I don't know that I would have gotten it. It's like the Israelites. God showed them so many things, and they didn't get it. And I say, I wouldn't get it either because I'm who I am. I'm an ordinary person. I don't get things when the Lord first tells me, shows me things. And it's looking back at the process. The tapestry on one side, it really looks ugly, and on the other side, it looks really nice. And we see the side that's not so nice looking, and we don't see the other side at all. Until we say, oh yeah, God was in this. So, being a maid for a retired missionary couple, that's right up her alley. She probably didn't see that, but that's, they saw her. Maybe they saw her possibility of becoming a missionary. I don't know, but they set her up with this couple, and she learned a lot from them. She accepted this position, but did not immediately see the Lord's plan in putting her in this position as a maid again. But in hindsight, we can see his plan in our lives as Gladys did. Don't give up, but trust God in every one of his promises, and know and trust his character. Read stories of great Christians, like Brenda said, not only for who they are, because they're all ordinary people, but what their great God did in them. I think Brenda mentioned that. And not for what they did necessarily on the mission field, but for what God did in them. Especially study his word and see how he was faithful to his people. See how he has been and will continue to be faithful to you as well. Journaling is so important for this. To, each day, even 5 minutes, just put down what God has taught you, what God is doing in your life, especially during a hard trial. And to face a hard trial and to worship God is what God wants us to do. Usually we shy away from the word when we're going through something. And we don't want to sing, and we don't want to pray, and we don't want to be with others perhaps, and we don't want to encourage each other. But we need to do that, especially to worship God, to just get the Psalms out and read them and pray them. And I've done this recently, and I thought, wow, what a terrific thing. I hadn't done that for a long time, but there's something going on, and I thought, I'm just going to take the whole day and just read Psalms. And it was so refreshing to me to do this. And it gave me a different perspective on God. And I just felt like I was so much closer to him through that. So even if you don't feel like it, do it anyway. Journal and worship God in the trial. And in your journaling, write down how you've done that, because for the young ones, that are here, they're going to want that. I started a book for Caleb. I don't know when I did it, but it was things that I had heard, wise sayings I had heard, things in the Bible, all kinds of things. And I wrote them down in a notebook. I gave it to him for graduation, and he didn't want it. He said, here, I'm presenting this to you. I said, I don't think I'll take that. I didn't expect him to, but I still have it, and maybe one day he will take it. But it was just everything I had learned, everything the Lord taught me, for him to learn and for him to take that and say, wow, this is what happened to Mom. This is how the Lord worked in her life. So journaling is very important. Okay, while she was with the Fishers, she said, never before had I met anyone who trusted him so utterly, so implicitly, and so obediently. They knew God as their friend, not as a being far away, and they lived with him every day. It's not wrong to ask respectfully why God is doing something in our lives, as long as it's respectful. We shouldn't do it in anger. It's not wrong to do that, because he wants us to. He wants us to say, Lord, what are you trying to teach me in this? And, instead of saying, well, I guess I'll catch it on the way, or it doesn't matter, I don't care. But Psalm 25, 4 and 5 are excellent verses to pray to the Lord along with so many other verses. Psalm 25, 4 and 5 says, show me your ways, O Lord, and teach me your paths. Guide me in your truth, for you are my Savior. My hope is in you. And I love those intimate prayers that, when we're not sure what to pray, just go to the Psalms, go to the prison epistles. There's wonderful Psalm prayers in there to pray. And it's like, this is God's word. How can I go wrong in praying these things? While she was with the Fishers, she was able to hear of their lives on the field and observe their lives personally. Some of her life training included going to the port town of Swansea in Wales. There she tried to persuade the women who hung out there at the docks to go home or to go to the rescue mission with her. She reports at one time she faced down drunken sailors in order to save the girls. Can you imagine this woman, 4'10"? And if you see a whole picture of her, her whole body, you'll say, how did she do that? But only God, again. The word feisty came to mind, and I said, well, bold. Bold is good. She was very bold. Again, she read about Abraham and how the Lord told him to leave his familiar country of Haran and go to an unfamiliar one. This impressed Gladys, and she went back to London to work and save money to go to China. So she was probably encouraged by the Fishers, and yet she still wasn't, she still didn't say, well, I'll just be a maid the rest of my life. That's, I'll just condescend to that. She said, I have this desire, and I'm going to do what I can to get there. She was not forcing the issue, but she was waiting for God to shut the door. She was not about to shut the door. Okay, going back to London showed her persistence and her perseverance. I want to say perseveration, but that's not it. Perseverance. Doors. Doors are the ways that the Lord shows us what to do. We knock on the door, he opens it, we go through. Knock on another door, he opens it, we go through. Or he'll slam it shut in a nice, gracious way. But that is the way that we need to do things, instead of just giving up and saying, no, I'm discouraged, I'm not going to do this anymore. Let's not be afraid of discouragement or rejection or the answer no, because that is how the Lord works in our hearts. Again, we get caught up in the process of seeing the outcome. We should not do that. We should get involved in seeing what God is doing in our lives and ask Him, what are you doing in my life during this time? As I read her account, again, it was easy to see how the Lord worked in her life. Don't we do that? We can tell others, oh, I see how the Lord's working in your life. And, other people are saying, I don't quite see that. We don't see it for ourselves. We don't see clearly what the Lord is doing all the time. Again, we need to ask Him. She was not trying to make her trip to China happen. She was not forcing God's hand, but she continued trusting the Lord as she walked through the doors. The Lord opened for her. The Lord opened for her. Godly counsel is so important to get a different perspective, and Proverbs is full of verses that say godly counsel is wise, in the multitude of counselors there is wisdom. So just a plethora of verses in Proverbs. That's what it's all about, wisdom. When we seek godly counsel, we are godly counsel, not just counsel. We are asking other people, what do you think? And we should not be afraid of that either. We should not be prideful to think, oh, I don't need that. I know what to do. I don't need anybody's advice. I don't need anybody's counsel. But when we ask, that we're getting a different perspective on things. Maybe they know something we don't. Maybe they're a little wiser than we are. And it's not wrong to do that. It's the right thing to do. She did that with the fishers. I thought their answer was very simple, but yet very profound. And isn't that how God is? He doesn't say a lot of things to us. He doesn't say, well, sit down, except for Job. He did that with him in Job 42, because he had to say, Job, who do you think I am? Are you me? Are you God? No, I am God. So sit down and take it easy. But anyway, she says, she asked them, how am I to know if he wants me to go to China or to stay in Bristol, England? And this was their answer. He will show you in his good time. Keep on watching and praying. And that was it. I had that said to me one time when Herschel and I courted. We went out on 2 dates, I think. I remember one. He remembers 2, which is nice. But anyway, we went to attended a Bible study, and I could not see. He would pay attention to me, and then he'd back off. And this was all because of his past and relationships and everything. He wanted to make sure that I was the one. And of course, I was expecting, he's going to ask me out for a date and all this other nice stuff. And so I asked our Bible study leaders that we had become good friends with. I said, and they were watching. Their daughters were watching, and I was like clueless. And they said the same thing. They said, "You just wait, Cindy. You just wait." And I said, "Okay." I was a little discouraged by that, but here we are. But their daughters would look out at the window after Bible study. We'd be standing out there talking, and they would go to their parents. They were in probably middle school. They would say, "Are they going to get married?" And their parents would say, "Just go and pray. Just pray for them." We had no idea this was going on until later, years later, when they told us these things. It was so funny. But I did not know what was going on, and I had to wait and pray. And that was such wise advice that they gave us. I wasn't going to share that, but it slipped in. Don't be afraid of discouragement or the answer no. The Lord sometimes changes our desires or moves us on in a different direction through those 2 things. He tests our desires and trusts in Him to see if what we really want is from Him. Also, He checks our motives to see if the desires He has given us are still for His glory or for us. All about motives. Again, waiting is so important as we get to know God and worship Him. When we have a trial, and I remember, Brenda, when Mike said you lost your lost Seth, and he was quick to move on. He wanted to move on, and that's a man. He wants to fix things for us. But you said, no, I don't want to waste this moment worshiping God. And that stuck with me. I said, wow, that is such a testimony when we go through hard times to say, I will worship God through this. I will not be discouraged. I will not get depressed. I will not dishonor God, but I will worship God. I will go to him and not stay away from him. The Lord knows our motives, right? But he tests our motives for us, not for him. But this time is for us waiting to be prepared for what he is doing in us. And again, his grace is sufficient when we need it, not before. That's Hebrews 4:16. Okay, I have the rest of my story, the Caleb's adoption story. I'll probably make this. Well, I've got some time. So we moved over here to Hillsborough County. We had tried adopting in Pinellas County, tried here. It was very hard. Nothing was happening. And when I first approached Herschel about adoption, he wasn't for it. He wasn't keen on the idea at all. He said, I'm not sure I can love someone else's child. Well, my heart just sank because I was ready. I was ready to do this. And I decided not nagging. I wasn't going to nag anymore. I wanted to see the Lord work in his life with this situation, this idea. And he did. Lo and behold, we were at a park one day, Philippi Park. I don't know if you know where it is in Safety Harbor, but really pretty park on the water. And we were there. I remember it distinctly. It was the day he proposed to me. I remember this day too because it was so special. And he said, there's no reason why we shouldn't try to adopt. We shouldn't try to attempt to adopt. I was like, whoa, this came out of the blue. Wow. Yeah, my life is wonderful. No. I was just so glad. It was like I didn't nag him, and the Lord spoke to his heart. And he is a great father today, especially in Caleb's situation today with being 21 and thinking he knows everything. And from a man who thought he could not love another person's child, or a child not his own, to the relationship that they have, that I just sit back and observe, because that's where I need to be right now. Just sit back and let Herschel take care of it. It's like, wow, this is amazing. But anyway, he said that, and so we put our papers in for adoption, and for a healthy girl, because that's what you do. That's available, and nothing was happening. We had prospective children, but they fizzled out. And again, I was like, by that time I was like sinking. I thought, I want this. I'm getting older, but I couldn't shut the door myself. I could not. I still had that desire, and I it's in us. It's in us women to nurture. So I said, I can't do this. I can't shut the door. Herschel couldn't either. He didn't dare shut the door on this because, the wrath of Cindy. But no, he couldn't, because he wanted to fix it. He wanted to not make it work, but he wanted to see what he could do to not make this happen, but to see if we could do this. So, and the wait time was getting longer. By the time we got all our papers in, they said, oh, the wait time is now like 2 years. I thought, I was like on the floor. I thought, I can't wait any longer. I'm not a young thing anymore. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't. And it wasn't idolatry. I didn't sense that it was idolatry. We kept praying, Lord, if this is your will, help us go through the doors, which we did. And we said, if it's not your will, then shut the door completely. So, my emotions were gone. I mean, I was just flat. And he said, well, let's try international adoption. Some people had done that. I said, whatever. That's where I was. I was like, he was on the horse, with a banner saying adoption going through the front lines, and I was kind of trailing back there somewhere. He was holding my hand, trailing back there somewhere, maybe holding onto the tail of the horse. I was not getting on that horse again. I would get near it, but I wasn't getting on that horse anymore. And he said, let's try for international adoption. So we did. I said, okay, whatever. He did most of the work, and he had me sign papers. Okay, I'm signing papers. as long as you know what you're doing, I'll sign these papers. We went to a meeting. He found a Christian organization. And I felt like I was perking up a little bit more with this meeting, but the Lord was guarding my heart. I said, I was guarding my heart. The Lord was guarding my heart because he didn't want me to be hurt, and he was just protecting me. So we went to the meeting, filled out paperwork, talked with people, and I felt the balloon, expanding a little bit more, and my emotional balloon. And let me see. There's, I lost my train of thought. Anyway, we went through that, and I was still cautious. The Lord is still guarding my heart. But on the way to, and Herschel was doing everything, from a man who didn't think he could love another person's child to, let's go through the battle lines. So it wasn't until on the plane to China, and I've told this story to some people, that we were all relaxed. I was all relaxed. We were on our way, and I said to the Lord, I said, Father, I know that you could still say no, but it was more of a, because I know that you're sovereign. And it was a really strong, it'll be okay. It'll be sad, but it'll be okay. Because we knew that we did everything that we could with adopting, with trying to adopt. So got to China, and Caleb came to me in the room that they had, and I was looking around saying, where's he going? Is he going to somebody else? And he came right to me, and I just lost it, and he lost it. And I said, God said yes. And it was just amazing. And that was the first trial with the program that I tried to start was a no. This was a yes. And so we never know what God's going to do. And in the process of all of that, which took years, we learned so much. We grew closer together. We knew the Lord better, and it was all worth it. You look back, it's like labor. I went through emotional labor. I never went through physical labor, but I went through emotional labor. And I could say at the end it was worth it, and I would do it all over again, but if I was younger. Okay, that was the second part of the adoption story. Let's see. I got to hurry on here. Okay, our responsibility is to pray and seek godly counsel. He agreed to. No, let me back up a little bit. Okay, she made regular deposits to the ticket master at the train station, who thought she was crazy for wanting to go to China, especially alone when there was a war going on between Russia and China. But only God could do this. Again, if I didn't know this was factual, I would say this didn't happen to this woman. He opens doors or he shuts them completely. Our responsibility is to pray and seek godly counsel. The train master agreed to accept payments until her ticket was paid for. Gladys was an unsubtle, straightforward person who was not trying to impress others at all. When I was reading her story, I saw absolutely no pride in her life. She was an observer of people, being in tune with their needs. Her theology was the same. This is from Noelle's book. Her theology was the same, clear and uncomplicated. There was a living God, and she was his servant. There was a loathsome creature called Satan, and she was his enemy. There was an immortal soul in every being, every human being proceeding to an eternity in either heaven or hell. Her job in life was to convince people that if they would put their trust in Jesus Christ, her Lord, who had died on the cross for them, they would get straight on the road to heaven. Since Jesus Christ had come to life again and had promised to be with those who trusted and obeyed him, however beset with trials and temptations, the road to heaven might prove to be. They need fear nothing, for he would never let them down. God is always with us. And again, as I get older, I realize, friends come and go and situations happen, but it's so comforting to know God is always with me. It's amazing. And he will never, ever leave us. Her family was in support of her going to China. Her mother met a retired missionary at a church named Jeannie Lawson. Jeannie was instrumental in where Gladys went in China. Gladys didn't even know where she was going to go, but her mother met Jeannie. Again, this is of the Lord. She was a widow who was looking for a young girl to come and assist her in the province of Shanxi, so Gladys had the funds, the person, and the place to go in China. Her family and friends provided clothes and other supplies she would need. She felt loved and the confirmation the Lord was indeed sending her to China. Again, an open door. You know, she didn't try to close it, and she didn't stop at discouragement. So on October 15th, 1930, she left Edmonton for China. Friends gave her clothes, food, and money. She had a suitcase and a fur coat, which is going to come in to play in a little while. She had a suitcase, a bedroll, and a pan for boiling water, and a small stove that ran on alcohol. Now imagine this short 4'10" woman with a fur coat, whether it fit her or not, I don't know, a fur coat carrying her bedroll, a suitcase, a stove, a pan. You know, I mean, I think of bag lady, I think of homeless, but I guess she was homeless. She didn't have a home except on the train. But I think, wow, I mean, what a woman, you know, and I complain about some things. That's amazing. So on October 15th, from Edmonton, England, near London, she took a train to Hull, England. From Hull, a ship across the English Channel to Holland, where she got on the Trans-Siberian Railway through Holland, Germany, and Poland, and finally into Russia. The Japanese had taken over you know, this all sounds like some drama on TV, doesn't it? I mean, I haven't even told much of it, but I was reading it thinking, wow, this is like an espionage kind of thing. You know, this woman by herself. So the Japanese had taken over the Siberian Railway, so she needed to get onto the Manchurian Railway going into Siberia. When she learned she could not stay on the train because it had come to the end of the line and was near the war zone, she decided to walk back to the nearest city called Chita. She spent nights in the cold where she was grateful for her fur coat, her teapot, and her stove, but especially she was grateful for her God. Was she afraid? Well, in the distance she heard wolves, and she didn't know what they were till maybe the next day, and someone told her, yeah, we have wolves around here. Maybe she wasn't familiar with the sound of them, but she was not afraid. She trusted in her God. When I am afraid, I will trust in you. Psalm 56:3, perhaps she quoted that. She took her Bible out and she looked up verses so that she wouldn't be afraid. They questioned her at Chita because she had already been there. They took her passport. This is interesting. They took her passport and they read that she was a machinist when it said missionary. And they wanted her to stay and work for her in Russia. She clarified she was not a machinist, but a missionary. They changed the title of missionary to machinist on her passport without her knowing it. But that was God's protection, because if they knew she was a missionary, they might send her back or kill her. At one point, she had all of her belongings taken except for her small Bible. They put her up in a room. This is really neat. They put her up in a hotel room, where a girl met her secretly and told her a man would knock on her door and she was to follow him. The man took her to a woman who took her to the port where she was able to get on a Japanese freighter going to Japan. I mean, doesn't that sound like, you know, a James Bond thing or something? On the train previously, in probably England or the Siberian, a Dutch couple met her and befriended her and said they would pray for her every night at 9 o'clock. They gave her some money, and they said this will come in handy one day. In Japan, another train to Kobe. So I'm not sure if you used the money to get on the freighter or another train. But anyway, in Japan, another train to Kobe, Japan. Wait a minute. She took another train to Kobe, Japan, where a missionary couple would take her in until she was able to get on another ship to China. In China, she met up with Jeannie Lawson at the Inn of the Eight Happinesses. Now, there's a movie called The Inn of the Sixth Happiness. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a good movie, but it's not factual. I would never, of course, it's a Hollywood movie, so you would never base anything on that. But Ingrid Bergman, who probably none of you know who that is. I was thinking of your mom. She might be here to say, yes, I know who that is. But anyway, she's back in my parents' day. You know, I heard them talking about her being a marvelous actress. I think she was a Swedish actress. But she was very tall, and Gladys said she didn't like that. She didn't like her playing her part. But Ingrid Bergman is also very bold and she played that part very well. Herschel and I saw it, and then I said, okay, now I need to read the books to get all the facts straight. So anyway, I'm not sure why the movie was called The Sixth Happiness, and it was about the 8 happinesses. I don't know. But anyway, I thought I'd slip that in. Good movie to watch. Okay, the inn was a resting place, especially for mule drivers in Shanxi, but also for anyone who needed a place to rest and have a meal. The inn was somewhat dilapidated, so Gladys's job was to see what she could do to help Jeannie restore it. While they fed the visitors, they shared the gospel and other Bible stories with them. Jeannie eventually died and left the inn to Gladys, but she had little money and wasn't sure how she would be able to keep it up. Well, God again. I just see God at every step here in her life. It's just amazing. It's not like, oh, I see what's going to happen. It's not predictable. It's God. You know, it is predictable because of God, but it's not like, oh, I see what's going to happen. It's God came in at every time. Gladys was chosen to be the one to enforce the law banning foot binding for young girls, especially in the villages. They had that law, I don't know how long ago, and then they banned it, and she was the one to go around and make sure that they were not doing that anymore. She was very firm to tell the mandarin, who was like the mayor or the governor, that she would share the gospel if he wanted her to enforce this law in those places. She was paid for her service, so she was able to keep up the inn. While in China, Gladys's legacy includes the calming down of prisoners in a riot by telling them Bible stories. Again, 4'10", you know, this little woman calming down these, you know, angry men by telling them Bible stories. God really used her not in a way that we would expect as a missionary, but in all these little places and situations. And again, to really appreciate her life, you've got to read about her stories. Gladys adopted several orphans who were left on the streets to die. I could really relate to this. She went to China. She adopted an orphan. I don't like calling Caleb an orphan, a child. She adopted, but her greatest feat is coming up. She adopted several orphans who were left on the streets to die. Perhaps the most important reason for the Lord wanting Gladys to go to China and preparing her with the long and very dangerous train ride was to take 100 orphans from Yangcheng, her village in Shanxi. Her village would be attacked by the Japanese, so she fled with the children to a safer place in China. So here again is this 4'10" woman trekking over the mountains of China with all these 100 children with some guides and some helpers. She again found herself trusting her God to save and protect them with the war going on all over. And the movie shows some of that, people not attacking them, but people just meeting up with, they were in the woods and the Japanese, and she avoided them, and she trusted her God to take care of her. Gladys returned to London, but never felt comfortable there. She eventually went to Taiwan, where she was involved with orphanages until she died in 1970. In 1936, she became a national of China, adopting their culture and dress as her own, and the people of China respected and loved her. Her heart was always with the Chinese people. So I hope this account of Gladys's life has been helpful. We are ordinary people whom the Lord has chosen to do his work for his purposes. This will always amaze me. It's all about him and his glory. We need to keep that in mind. One more verse. Psalm 16:11. You will make known to me the paths of life. In your presence is fullness of joy. In your right hand there are pleasures forevermore. And I just want to say, ladies, I shared my stories with you not to promote me, not to promote, anything we did, because everything we did, the adoption was totally of God. We got at the end of it, we filled up paperwork, and we said, God did this. And our stories are really God's stories of Him in our lives. So Brenda said, if you want to share, or anytime, if any kind of a discipleship situation or over coffee or, just chatting, share your stories, because we're ordinary people with a great God who is doing amazing things in our lives. And don't be afraid of that, and don't think, oh, nobody would want to hear it, or I'm not that special. No, you're not, but God is. So share your story, because it's really God's story in us. And everybody's got a story, right? All God's children got issues, but a great God working through those issues.